One area of trade between Canada and the US that has always faced disputes is the lumber industry. There's a long history of tariff wars, in particular the Americans putting duties on softwood lumber from this country. And there are actually tariffs on lumber right now. Let's get more from Daryl Swetlashov, Senior Managing Director and Head of Research at Raymond James. It's great to have you here in the studio as well, Daryl.
It's fun to be in the studio instead of on TV, Andy.
You note that this is, if we do get new U.S. tariffs on lumber, you note this is nothing new for the Canadian industry.
No, Andy. This industry's faced tariff and trade restrictions for the better part of the last 50 years, heading back to the early 80s. There's been 5 big disputes, and currently it's about a 14.4% tariff on average that Canadian companies face exporting to the U.S. And it was already scheduled to double to near 30% by August. We expect that announcement coming towards the end of this month.
Could Trump, I know it may be impossible to answer, but could Trump's proposed tariffs go on top of that?
So that's the speculation. And we did publish the research note yesterday that looked at what would be the implications if we faced, a 55% tariff for the second half of this year. And it's undeniably punitive for the industry.
You warned that BC, which has already seen so many shutdowns of mills, could face more losses in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, a 25% tariff at today's lumber price would raise costs by about US $100. And we certainly don't have that margin today in British Columbia or Quebec. Most Canadian mills would be really struggling if, in the event that those costs came up and prices didn't offset.
Just remind us, the problem in BC is partly shortage of trees, isn't it? Partly because of the mountain pine beetle.
There's no question that historically we had a low-cost business in British Columbia. However, with the mountain pine beetle, less trees available, too many mills chasing too many trees, and log costs went up higher. Some of these problems, though, are self-imposed. We do have access to fiber in BC is challenged with some of the government policies as well. So. Not all the beetle. Can't just blame it on that.
Okay. What about Quebec? Is there a shortage of fiber, as the industry calls it there?
Similar to BC, there's some fiber supply issues in Quebec, and as a result, you have high log costs. And for a sawmiller, that's about 2/3 your variable cost is just getting a log into your yard. So it's hard to work around them. If logs are expensive, it's a tough business.
What, among the equities, which ones do you think are best positioned right now? I mean, West Fraser, the industry giant, do you think it looks like a buy, Dar?
Well, you know what's happened, and in 2006, when the last settlement was, and the Canadians got their money back, there was a wave of investments into the U.S. South. So a lot of the Canadian companies diversified out of Canada, out of British Columbia. And so the two things that matter here are how much of these duties can we pass on to the U.S. consumer, and where are your assets located? How much will it face a tariff? So it's a bit counterintuitive, but there are some companies like Interfor, like Canfor, like West Fraser. They have significant capacity outside of Canada. You know what? Under our scenarios, where if you can pass on even half of the cost of the duties, it's a tailwind for earnings. Earnings will actually go up for those players.
Because domestic lumber prices in America will go up?
Correct. And because they have so much capacity. So it's quite material for Interfor in particular and Canfor. Now, these tariffs would apply to OSB, which they currently don't. There's no tariff on OSB currently. So West Fraser, if they can't pass on a whole bunch of the duty, they do face a little bit of an earnings decline. But if they can pass off half, we still see 45% increase in earnings for them.
West Fraser, WFG, and that massive oriented strand board acquisition they did a few years ago, was that a smart move in retrospect?
Yes, brilliant.
Right, because the OSB market's been strong.
Yeah, it's tied to single-family housing, and that market's been pretty good. So we've seen that perform. The other two stocks that we really like, Adentra, strong buy rated. They're an architectural supplier.
What's the symbol?
ADEN.
Okay.
And Doman Forest Products.
Okay.
Adentra has over 90% of their business in the U.S. So to the extent you see animal spirits in the U.S. and that economy going, we think that company can do very well.
And Dentra. Now, am I right in thinking they used to have another name?
They were called Hardwoods before.
Right. They used to be an income fund years ago, I think, maybe. I'm not even sure, but there's the stock. Anyway, so they're more of a specialty player.
Architectural supplier of goods.
Sort of high-end wood.
Yes, and fixtures and all kinds of components that go into a house.
And then Doman Industries, we frequently have the CEO on, building products both sides of the border, very big in treated lumber, I think.
Correct, and not much of their business across the border. So I saw the stock go down 5% yesterday at one point, and for no good reason. They're not exposed to these tariffs at all.
Doman Building Materials, right, because would they have manufacturing south of the border?
Yes, a lot of their expansion has been south of the border.
Right, and DBM. You're less keen on Canfor, CFP?
Actually, Canfor benefits quite a bit as well. They have only 20% of their shipments will be exposed to these Trump tariffs, so 80% not. So they make out quite well as well. It's the Canadian-only companies that really suffer.
Who would they be?
Like a Conifex or Western Forest. They need about 50 to 75% pass-through to offset these tariffs.
Mm-hmm. Western Forest, I think they are WEF, if I remember right, and they're specialists in cedar and stuff,
Correct.
Are they? Yeah. But a lot of their stuff goes to the States, doesn't it?
And it's high value as well. So
right, the cedar being magical wood that never goes off. Yeah, Daryl, we better leave it there. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Daryl Swetlashov is Senior Managing Director and Head of Research